Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. I am Bogus Meat Factory. Let's talk about games. Today, we are going to be talking about a very particular genre of game that I personally adore. Text adventure games. Now, many of you have probably only heard rumor of these once fabled beasts. Prehistoric software from the time long ago. They whisper of Zorks, of a mind forever voyaging, of Planetfall. But I promise you, dear viewers, they are in fact real. It is a genre of game that I personally have always really loved since my teenage years. I remember my mom had come home with a software collection of the Lost Treasures of Infocom. Infocom was a company in the 1980s that published Zork and these really iconic franchises of that time for computer software. They were text adventure games. They used a parser. All right, a parser is a command line. You are typing commands to a computer. It is interpreting that information, and it is responding in kind, and it tells a story. There are puzzles and riddles and things you must solve and use brain power in order to overcome those obstacles. Text adventures are really interesting, and they fell to the wayside compared to modern graphics. Now, they haven't been commercially super popular, and only recently have they really started to have more of a renaissance. The interactive fiction community has started to grow exponentially since the early 2000s and late 1990s when they really started to flower, you know? And it's something that a lot of people don't get to play or experience, or always kind of have these preconceived notions of how excruciatingly difficult or tedious those games are. In reality, that hasn't been the case. It's not really the case. In early 2021, my good friend Nick and I had started playing through the Infocom games chronologically and streaming them. And we've gotten through, at the time of this recording, through 13 games, I believe, of Infocom games, and barely needing any hints. Like, I would say that we got maybe 5 hints total out of all 13 games, which is remarkable. And we had learned a lot about the genre and kind of how to approach and play these games. And it is, I get it. I understand that for a lot of people, it's a different way to play a game. It's a different way to play that is conventional or traditional, the things that we normally, a modern gamer, have the ability to grasp and understand. It's a tool set that we don't necessarily have. And now we have to build those tools. And I think that we should play them. So let's talk about the reasons as to why, but the tools that we should have to be able to approach these things. The first thing that is most vital and important, and a lot of retro people will understand this, right? The most important thing to do first and foremost is read the manual, right? Any old game will tell you that the manuals aren't like the manuals of today. Manuals back in the day were very fully fledged, many pages, typically illustrated and provided vital information that wasn't conveyed inside of the game, telling you what items did. And in the case of text adventure games and interactive fiction, they told you what commands did and what commands the parser would recognize. And that's incredibly important. But not only this, in the case of Infocom, their games typically were housed to the world of the Feelie. That was a thing that a lot of people don't know about. Nowadays, Feelies were collectibles and these sorts of things that would actually serve in-game purposes and provide context. So they would do things like give you clues to things in the game, but in an in-character way. Postcards that provided information, letters, tangibles like coins, and these sorts of things that you could actually feel, that were tangible and really interesting. So they had just a whole world of information for you. So not only was it helpful and informational, but it was also entertaining to do. And luckily, if you were to try to get into text adventure games now, that stuff's all available online. So you're not missing it because it's, not physical and tangible anymore. It's all been uploaded, and it is something that we are able to at least refer to. And that stuff's incredibly valuable. But understanding that sets the precedent, the manual. It informs you of what they expect you to do. So it helps you understand how to talk to the computer. And it's teaching you the language, the love language of the computer, so that you can, get information on it. And you can interact with it. It's the foreplay, as they would say. And it's absolutely important that if you are going to play any old school text adventure game, you must read that manual. Now, the second thing is a thing that is going to ruffle some feathers for some folks. I wouldn't say this about a lot of games. Only very certain genres require you to do this. And that's map things out. It's really important to dungeon crawlers that don't have that feature. Typically dungeon crawlers that came pre the mid-1990s. Games like Eye of the Beholder and Wizardry and Might and Magic didn't really come with those mapping tools, and so you had to kind of hand map everything yourself. In the case of text adventures, it isn't as tedious as a dungeon crawler, but mapping is incredibly important. One, it's going to give you spatial awareness. One of the major downsides to being something that's text adventure, right, being pure text, is that it doesn't provide the visual orientation. You don't really understand where you are in a space. And having these things mapped out meticulously helps you better understand where you are spatially, but also gives you a better sense of the environment and world, because there's many instances where mapping is going to give you a better picture and is absolutely mandatory in order to understand some very important puzzles. For instance, in a game like Starcross by Infocom, it's the map. When you have built this map, you have a better understanding of how the world is shaped. It is actually incredibly thrilling to, once you start to put the pieces together of this map that you have now made as you explore this world, where you are and how this world behaves. I know that sounds really cryptic, but I don't want to spoil things. It's beautiful. But there's other games like Sorcerer, where having to map things out is incredibly important because there are puzzles where you're manipulating a map. And so you need to understand the locations in order to manipulate them properly, in order to solve the puzzle. And it can be fun. Now, you don't have to hand draw everything, although there is one exception. There is one game that does require you to have to hand map everything, and that would be the original Zorik, the very first Infocom game, because its maps are just, it's a pain in the butt. Zorik has this unique feature where if you go west and then you go east, you're not in the same place you started. And that can be incredibly disorienting, and rightfully so. It's a major flaw for that game, but it is the first of its kind, right? The first of Infocom's games. They improve and they get better. They don't do that all the time. But there are tools that you can have and use. I use Trizboard, which is a wonderful mapping tool on my computer that allows you to really quickly and efficiently create maps of the environments and set things up and label things properly to give you a better sense of awareness, as well as notate important items and these sorts of things, which is really incredible. It's a massive lifeline in going through these games. So yeah, if you want to play text adventures, be ready to map things. It doesn't have to be unfun, because part of it, they built these games with that in mind. So when you're mapping things, you start to get an understanding of where you are, and there are puzzles related to it, and they click really, really well, and it's a joy to do. It's a joy to do. Just take your time. The next one is, I'd find even more controversial than mapping things, right? Because with most games, it's like they expect you to take notes. People don't want to do that anymore. We have auto notes and waypoint markers and these sorts of things. But this thing here, expect failure. Expect to have to start over from scratch, and to probably do so multiple times. With text adventures and how they were designed in the 1980s, they would typically put you in a situation where you have to kind of identify what the goal is. Sometimes it's expressly stated, like a murder mystery, and trying to find out who did it. Other instances, it's, I need to collect these treasures, or I'm on a quest, I know what I need to do. But there's other instances where you're thrust into a situation and you don't entirely know what it is you're supposed to do. But what's happening is there's a timer running in the background, a ticking clock. And once that number of turns is hit, a number of commands you've put in, that clock has run out and you die. But what happens is it identifies your goal and it gives you purpose. Like, okay, I now know what I need to do. And that it's a great way to funnel players into this, where they now have a problem to identify. They have to address that problem. And now they have a better understanding of the game, the world, and what they want you to do. And now when it opens up into something bigger and more wide, you now have the tools to be able to address it. So expect to start over. Expect to soft lock yourself. Expect to make mistakes. But it isn't as bad as it sounds. Because hear me out on this. And this is really important. Please understand that, like, with a graphical game, if you had to start over from scratch, right? You have cutscenes to go through, dialogue to listen to. Then the physical execution of moves and enemies to fight and levels to progress through. And like, I get it. That stuff takes time. Even in the graphical adventure games, you had to move through the environments still and go to the locations and do the things over and over again. But in a text adventure game, the limitation is your typing speed. So say you have gone through and collected these things and solved these puzzles, and now you have to start all over again. And now you're just like, east, down, west, west, up, west, get thing, put thing in thing, open door, boom, 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 and you're already back to where you were. It literally will take you, it's 10 minutes of your time instead of 4 hours, you know? It's so easy to get back to where you were, and you have to be saving a lot and using proper save notations to really inform you about where you are. But not only this, these games informed you through death. There are so many instantaneous instances where death and failure doesn't mean the end of the game. Far from it, and in reality, there are certain games, like in the case of Zork 2, that death actually provides you hints and information that is vital to understanding the game. And it isn't game over at all. But a lot of people will see death and be like, no progress has been made. But in a text adventure, typically, progress has been made a lot through death and through failure. And we're able to at least then move through it. Sometimes it's the missing puzzle piece. There's a situation where my friend Nick and I were playing Zork 3, and we didn't know kind of like what our goal was. Why are we understood like what we were supposed to do. The goal of the game is to appease the dungeon master, right? But we didn't know how to do that. But through death, we instantaneously knew that's what we need to do. Okay, like we got it now. Easy. We now totally understand or have a more defined moment of clarity where we now figure out what we have to do. And that's how text games work. So don't view failure, don't view death or a soft lock as, I have to do this over again. Because it typically, It's a small setback, but you've learned and gained so much more information now that you can do things more efficiently and clearly. And that is exciting. Once you know how to do things, you now have a mastery over it. It's great. The last thing that I want to talk about to give you tools on how to approach text adventure games is to collaborate. This isn't a culturally acceptable thing nowadays, but rely on other people. Bring in friends and family to play this game with you, because two heads are better than one. But not only that, you're sharing this story and you're sharing this experience. Now this mental struggle that you're going through isn't a burden that weighs solely on your shoulders. There are other people there. That perspective makes puzzle solving a lot more interesting because people now have different ideas. And that makes the game infinitely easier. We aren't alone in having to solve this. And if others are with you and you've completed the game, that doesn't take away from your accomplishment of beating it. You beat it, your friend beat it, your family, they all had a part in this. That doesn't diminish your own personal accomplishment of beating this. You had help and other people working together. You didn't have a guide. The answer came in a natural way. And I learned this. We had done this a lot in my youth. My family and I would get together to finish really tough puzzles in Return to Zork, which was a point-and-click adventure game that was graphical. But I had streamed Callahan's Crosstime Saloon, which was a game by Legend Entertainment. And in its help section, it literally states, adventure games are meant to be shared. They're meant to be shared with others and to play it with others because you'll end up having a more enjoyable experience. And I couldn't agree more. Playing these text adventure games with my good friend Nick has really opened my eyes to the possibilities. It becomes a more fulfilling event to socialize and to collaborate. It's so special. In my personal story, my friend Nick would be at the helm. He'd be controlling and typing the game. And so he was entering the commands, and I would be mapping on Trisboard. And he lives very far away, and so we have to do things remotely with screen sharing, like we just go through Discord. But we have this technology now to be able to play with others, and I feel like we aren't using it to the fullest of its abilities. But the fact that he and I are coming together now to play these games and tackle them with relative ease is a testament to the longevity of this genre, this oft forgotten genre. They're so special. Now, I want to mention why I'm doing this in the first place. Why am I talking to you guys about text adventure games? Nobody cares about text adventure games. That's because just this month, December, I decided I wanted to start an interactive fiction club. That's where people can come together and every month tackle a new text adventure or interactive fiction. There's a distinction, but we're not going to get into that. Blah, blah, blah. And going back and forth between old classic games and more modern games, and each and every month just going back and forth between those two and talking about them. But not only this, but relying on each other as a group to be able to tackle this stuff together, as long as nobody's just outwardly spoiling it. If a person has already beaten the game or is sitting there with a guide, no, don't go sit there tell people what they need to do. Let everybody work together and play these games and try to understand them more, because they're very misunderstood. A lot of people view them to be incredibly tedious or really difficult or unstimulating. And in reality, a lot of it has to deal with just this way that we as people have secluded ourselves. Open this up to your friends. Open this up to your family. Let these games become a more communal experience. And so I started this monthly club so that people could enjoy the community more. So I extend an invitation to all of you. If you are ever interested in wanting to play a text adventure game, if you are ever interested in wanting to tackle like old Infocom games or Legend Entertainment games that are just magical, join. The link will be in the description. Everyone is invited. As long as you have compassion and love and understanding in your heart, you are always welcome. And I think it's incredibly vital to keep the memory of these old games alive and to have the understanding of the design philosophy of the games of old and apply them to modern interactive fiction. I want to thank you guys very much for watching. I am Bogus Meat Factory. If you have ever played an interactive fiction or text-based adventure game that you love, throw it down in the comments. Tell me why you love it. I want to hear it. I will showcase it on a future episode. I greatly appreciate everyone's time, and I really appreciate all of the folks who have watched. It means the world to me, and I hope that you take this opportunity to give text adventure games a shot. They're absolutely worth it. Thank you all for watching. Have a great night, and as always, to humor. Thank you.